So Anthony Joshua has been doing many interviews since he's over in the UK for the Dylan White kickoff press conference. And one thing that he's been saying to a lot of the boxing outlets is that there's a double standard at play, whereby when Tyson Fury went the distance with Otto Wallin a few years ago, nobody complained. But when he went the distance with Jermaine Franklin, everybody was up in arms and said that it was a really poor performance and that AJ's gun shy, etc., etc. Well, that's not actually true, because when Tyson Fury went the distance with Otto Wallin, there was a lot of criticism of Tyson Fury's performance. I remember it well. And because of the fact he had some issues against Wallin, there were lots of people doubting him going into the Deontay Wilder rematch, which was immediately after the Otto Wallin fight. I personally was wondering, how's his eye going to hold up in the Deontay Wilder rematch? Because the cut he got against Wallin, which was caused by an Otto Wallin left hand early in that fight, was really deep. It was a terrible cut. Now, there's something that separates the two performances. They both went the distance, yes, but Tyson Fury wasn't scared in the ring against Otto Wallin. He wasn't gun shy. He let his hands go. He was aggressive in the fight after he got caught in particular. Whereas with Anthony Joshua, he was very circumspect against Jermaine Franklin. He looked like a guy who was afraid to get hit. That's the difference. And Tyson Fury was still seen then as a boxer. He wasn't seen as some knockout specialist who's going to go in there and destroy you. So the fact he went the distance with Wallin wasn't that shocking, since he wasn't seen as a puncher at that time. Whereas Anthony Joshua is seen as a puncher. He's seen as a big, strong heavyweight who lets his hands go. That's how he built his reputation early on in his career. So to then come back against Jermaine Franklin, a guy who most people, their perception was that the Anthony Joshua of old would get rid of this guy. He'd destroy him, he'd knock him out. So to see him go 12 rounds with him and not want to engage, not want to let his hands go against a much smaller guy, remember? This is why Anthony Joshua receives, still to this day, more criticism for that fight than Tyson Fury did against Wallin in the long term. But again, Fury did get criticism for the Wallin performance. Maybe not as much criticism as AJ's got for the Franklin performance, that's true. But Fury went on to prove himself against Deontay Wilder after that performance against Otto Wallin. You see what I'm saying? Whereas AJ hasn't yet done that after the performance against Franklin. The old adage in boxing is you're only as good as your last fight. And in Anthony Joshua's last fight, it was Jermaine Franklin. In Tyson Fury's last fight, it was Chisora. Before that, it was Dylan White. Before that, it was Deontay Wilder. So he's knocking people out. Whereas with Anthony Joshua, again, a guy who built his whole reputation off being a knockout puncher, a combination puncher. All of a sudden, we don't see many of the combinations. He's in there with a much smaller guy, afraid to let his hands go. And it's the same thing that we saw against Alexander Usyk. A much smaller guy, only weighs 220 pounds. AJ's 240 plus. And he's in there with a guy who's outboxing him. So you have to take the bull by the horns. You have to try and drag Usyk into a dogfight. You have to take him into the trenches. You have to do whatever it takes to win the fight. But Anthony Joshua failed to do that. With Tyson Fury, on the other hand, whenever he's been tested in the ring and he's been put in a difficult situation, in a tough predicament, he's always done whatever it takes to overcome. We saw that early on in his career in the rematch with John McDermott. Did what it took to overcome a difficult situation. Same thing when he fought Nevin Pikage, got dropped in that fight. Did what it took to overcome and get the win. Same thing against Steve Cunningham. Same thing against Deontay Wilder, against Otto Wallin. Whenever he's tested and there's a chance, a real chance in a fight that he could lose, he's always been able to overcome it. And that's what it takes at the elite level. Whereas with Anthony Joshua, it's a mixed bag. Okay, he overcame getting wobbled early against Dylan White. He overcame getting dropped and hurt against Klitschko. But then he didn't overcome the adversity in the first Ruiz fight. He didn't overcome Alexander Usyk twice, and he had 2 bites at the cherry against Usyk and still couldn't do it in the second fight. Couldn't pull the trigger, wasn't anywhere near aggressive enough, didn't impose his physical size on Usyk, still fought a kind of polite fight. Whereas the kind of fight he should have fought against Usyk both times is the way that Tyson Fury fought against Steve Cunningham. You see, this is what separates B-level fighters or even A-level fighters from A-star level fighters, you see? So, yeah, I kind of disagree with what AJ said there about there being a double standard regarding the criticism of his performance against Franklin versus the criticism of Fury's performance against Wallin. It's a bit more nuanced than he's making it out to be. What I will say, however, is that there is a bias on TalkSport in favor of Bricktop. Bricktop has TalkSport, including Simon Jordan, in his pocket. How? I'm not exactly sure. Maybe it's just his really forceful, persuasive personality. Maybe he's not threatening to feed anyone to the pigs. But for some reason or another, Simon Jordan, Gareth A. Davis doesn't have a spine, but Simon Jordan at least has a spine, but his spine turns to jelly when he's sat opposite Bricktop. I don't know what that's all about. Maybe some of you guys could give me some ideas. But yeah, AJ makes a good point with regards to that. TalkSport are good for most things when it comes to boxing, but whenever they're dealing with Bricktop, their backside falls out. It's really quite disappointing. They stick it on Eddie Hearn, as they should, but where's that same energy for Bricktop? It's just not there. They let him go up there, start shouting and screaming, spinning his ridiculous narratives, and he don't get pulled. It's like, come on. Anyway, I'll leave it there.